It's back, the Reckless Renewables Rally. Make a statement where it truly counts, this time in Canberra. Join us on the Parliament House lawn at 10 a.m. on Tuesday, February 6th, the first session of Parliament for 2024. People from across the country, coastal and regional areas are rallying for the government to stop the reckless rollout of environmentally harmful, unreliable and costly so-called renewable projects. These include wind, solar and high voltage transmission line projects. Listen to speakers representing the federal and state governments, community organisations and environmentalists, all accompanied by great music and entertainment. Bring your flags, banners, signs and most importantly, your voice and ears to support rural and regional Australia. Together, let's ensure that the Minister for Climate Change and Energy, Chris Bowen, and the Australian Government take responsibility and stop the risks and costs associated with their reckless and obsessive rush to adopt these so-called renewable energy projects. What's on the line is Australia's national interests, our economy, our security and the well-being of our environment both now and into the future. Join us in Canberra. Together we can make a difference. Not clean, not green, not net zero.
No one has ever shown that human emissions of carbon dioxide drive global warming.
We have a massive power, and it's the power to say no.
They put all these words on these flyers and it means nothing. It's garbage.
We're all going to die!
Doctors are gaslighting patients.
If you keep silent, then this is what's going to happen. And they'll make us silent.
I would rather paper cut my eyelids than have anything to do with this voice.
We are one people, one flag, one Australia.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the XCandidates. My name is Stephen Tripp. Now, Adam, last week we had Birchall Wilson on the show, and Birchall was a wealth of knowledge when it came to economics and all things, but we got a lot of really great feedback as well. Now, two people, in fact, jumped on to buy me a coffee, which we have right here. Martin Jenkins bought us 20 coffees. He said that that training camp needs funding, and Jude has brought us 10 coffees. Jude said, "Love you guys and you're great guests. Thank you." What do you think of that, Adam?
I think independent media rules, and I think our viewers and our special guests that come on appreciate us giving them a platform where we can have a robust conversation about specific topics that happen. So having Birchall on was really, really good. First time we've had a proper economist on, and it was really interesting. So interesting that we have the biggest thing I took away from that particular interview was that massive amounts of immigration drive up housing prices. If you want an easy way to help fix housing prices and affordability is to probably drive down immigration. I think he said it was 40%, or there was a massive figure. It was like they were 40% more expensive because of the immigration numbers that come in. And I think, as you can see, we've got a particular government in power at the moment who's, almost doing an open border kind of thing, or, wanting to bring in millions of people. And it just means that the housing prices are going to go up in the trends that Birchall was, had analysed and was telling us about. So that was a big takeaway, because I've had different politicians talk to me over the years about the pros and cons. Some say, "Oh, you need immigration to drive economy," and then some, and then now having somebody else who's saying, "Well, it can drive economy, but then it also drives up housing prices." So there has to be a balance, and I think we need a clever government and a intuitive government to actually figure out a good balance of immigration, keeping the economy going, and manufacturing, and the jobs that people don't want to do, immigrants do them. So there's a line that needs to be drawn, and I think they should stick to that in their policies.
Now, Jude also signed up for membership on Buy Me a Coffee, so $5 a month. So we're gonna have to think. Adam and I are gonna have to put some heads together and think about what that will entail. but we'll definitely do something for Jude. And for anyone else that wants to subscribe to us per month, it's only $5. So that option is there. Our first member. So thank you, Jude. Thank you very much. And
Welcome.
yes, welcome. And also at the start of the broadcast tonight, there was the promo for the Reckless Renewables Rally. It's coming up. It's fast approaching, the 6th of February. Now, if you can make it down to Canberra, it starts at 10 a.m. outside Parliament House. It's supporting all the farmers that are having their land ripped up by high voltage transmission line projects, wind farms, solar farms, people in Port Stephens and down the Illawarra that are dealing with offshore wind farms, and up in far north Queensland where they're bulldozing biodiverse corridors and areas of rainforest and forest just to put these high voltage transmission lines in and wind farm projects. I mean, these are environmental issues. People up in Queensland are worried about koalas and things. So it's not all lovely and beautiful, these renewable projects. There are consequences, and these people are rallying in Canberra. If you can make it, please do so. I think it's an important event. So please get down there. Adam, you're coming down, right?
Yeah, we'll be down there. Stephen's going to finish up work and we're going to we're going to drive on down there. So I'm the chauffeur. I'm the chauffeur on that day. I'm
working the night before and that night. So yeah, straight to Adam's house after work, 5 a.m. in the car down to Canberra. I might get an hour or two if I'm lucky of sleep.
Yeah, and we'll try to we'll make sure we miss the kangaroos this time.
Yes.
Last time we were down the road trip we had down to Victoria was a wild one.
But this might be a wild one tonight because we've got a very entertaining guest on. He runs his own podcast. I met him at the Australians for Science and Freedom conference a few months ago now, and he did a very interesting presentation on his journey through establishing his podcast and delving into independent media and the challenges and the struggles and the rewards that come from that. So I thought we might have him on and hear his story because he's been on a similar path to what we have been, and we definitely need to support independent media, especially in today's age of the mainstream media and narratives and emotion driving media a lot of the time instead of what's really going on out there. So his name is Victor Dalziel. Victor, welcome to the XCandidates.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Adam. Thanks for having me on.
No, it's my pleasure.
Thank you for pronouncing my surname correctly.
I did the research. Adam always says we don't do research, but I do a lot of research, and I actually had to jump onto YouTube to work out how to pronounce it. Otherwise, I would have completely stuffed it up.
Thank you so much for having me on. I tell you what, I was a little bit nervous going live before we came to air, but after watching your intro, I'm even more nervous now. I didn't realize you guys had so many superstars on.
Oh, well,
and to be honest, I think you're a little bit further along the journey than me. But thank you for definitely having me on. It's awesome to be here.
No, well, thank you. Right. Thank you for the kind words. I'll plug your Rumble straight away. So this is your Rumble page. You've got quite a few videos on here. You're also on Twitter as well. So I guess people just type in your name and they'll find your content. Is that right?
Yes, they will. On Rumble and on Twitter. I pretty much just go on Twitter for about half an hour a day to get inspiration, to get angry, and just to see literally what's riling up the world that day. It's really, I think it's really good for that. But Rumble's probably the best place. You definitely cannot find me on YouTube anymore because I did a purge on the 1st of January. I wasn't really welcome on YouTube anyway, so I thought I might as well just take down all my videos. So Rumble's the place. I think Rumble's good, free speech alternative. And the good thing about Rumble is only about 30 to 40% of Australians are aware that Rumble actually exists. So there's a lot of opportunity for growth there. And I really like the fact that I can just go on Rumble and just speak from the heart, speak honestly, and not have to worry about any guidelines that I could possibly be violating. So not that, contrary to your introduction, not that I'm too crazy. I just like to speak honestly and a little bit more off the cuff than what YouTube probably allows. Yeah. I found what you're saying, Adam, about the guest last week really interesting, because this was something that I was reading about, and I understand the economic arguments for immigration, but it was a little bit mind-boggling to me when I read the figures of what has occurred in Australia in 2023. And the excuse that seems to be being put forward is not only the economic excuse, but also that for the 3 years during COVID, we pretty much had zero. But I was astounded to find out that it was over 700,000 in 2023. And that if you go to a major city, 1 in 25 people have arrived in the last 12 months. It's quite staggering. And I believe the figure in Canada is over 1 million. The United States were over 3.5 million. It kind of boggles the mind a little bit, particularly when you start to look at countries like Ireland as well, and how many people they're letting in. It's almost like there is a bigger agenda or another reason that we're not being told. But I know that's not the topic of the conversation today.
No, that's okay, because we can talk about that, because the thing is, it's tearing down your cultural heritage. Okay, so if you have mass immigration, like we're a small population, 27 million people, 27 to 28 roughly, right? Okay, like mostly, you know, Australian, good Christian Australian values. It's been like that for a long, long time. Okay, and then I just found out, I don't know who was telling me today that Australia, my uncles actually that the UN have named Australia as a non-Christian country.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
I think that happened because of the last census. So it was the first time in Australian history that there were more people that ticked that they were atheist or agnostic, or I think there was a category like spiritual or something,
Yep.
which they considered to be like non-religious. So yeah, I think there was about 54%. Don't quote me on that figure, by the way,
No,
but it was
that's
about
okay.
that, and that's the first time in Australian. Well, I shouldn't say in Australian history, but in the last 250 years that has happened. Yeah.
Well, that's a wild statistic, considering, you know, we were good church-going people, and you know, Australia's laws and foundation is based on Judeo-Christianity, and all of a sudden, you know, the UN turn around and go, whoa, well, we've got, you know, 54% that aren't you know, they're agnostic or not you know, dedicated to a particular religion, so we'll label you non-religious. So, you know, it's definitely a breakdown of our culture and a breakdown of our values. And I think when you have mass migration, those things happen as well. So you, especially allowing people who aren't going to assimilate to our values, as well as what used to happen. And you know, these are the topics that come up, I think, on the street and on this. Everyone knows, or you might not know, Victor, but I'm a tradesman, so I'm in and out of people's houses every day. You know, 6 or 7 people's houses a day, 6 to 7 days a week. And I talk to people about this. They see my big sign on the side of the car and go, "Oh, are you part of, you know, council, or what are you?" And I'm like, "Oh, I was a candidate, this, that, the other." And we start talking. And, you know, most people, you know, even other ethnic groups value the core Australian values of, you know, give it a go, and, you know, freedom of speech and all these kind of things. And they all, it doesn't matter what ethnicity they are, they all say that they like it when people come in and assimilate to our way of life. And I think when you have an overrun of 1,000, you know, you get 100,000 people come in, 700,000 people come in like last year, that dilution into certain ethnicities.
Sorry, I don't know.
Yeah, Adam, you're breaking up a bit there, but you're just cutting out. Maybe we'll give you a second, Adam, just to see if your internet refreshes, or we might have to get you to jump back.
Sorry about that, guys.
No, we could hear your audio. Your visual went out first, but then your audio started to cut out as well, unfortunately. But I've got a comment here from Sasha. She said, "Is it true that thousands of people in the US are trying to block the borders?" Victor, have you heard anything about that? I did see an article on news.com that there was a convoy heading down to the border, but I didn't read the article. So do you know a little bit more about it?
All I know is that I think Texas is trying to act above and beyond what the federal government wants, because I think they've just had enough. So I believe, I don't want to say the National Guard, but there was one force that was heading down there on behalf of the Texas government, but that's all I heard.
Yeah, well, that's going to be an interesting situation. But maybe we'll get back to you. I mean, immigration is a huge topic, but I guess to let everyone in our audience know more about you first, what is your background? I know you have a PhD, and you're also a researcher, a writer, and a DJ.
Amateur DJ.
Seems like you have
necessary. I'm sure, as you guys appreciate, when you do this sort of work, you need to have something that completely removes your mind from thinking about all of these issues. And for me, that was that's my meditation. That's how I escape everything. And I really, I mean, I'll also exercise, but mainly music, because it's the only thing really that completely switches me off. Because otherwise, thinking about all these issues and trying to deal with like the avalanche of things that are happening on a daily basis can really drive you. It can create a really negative mind space, and I just need to step outside of that. So the music's been amazing for that. As for everything else, I did a doctorate of philosophy at University of Western Sydney. It's a great university. I was part of a terrible team. I'm not going to talk about too much, but just keep in mind, people, that everything that we are experiencing today started in the university system 15 years ago. So, and it has only gotten worse. And I really hope that what's happening now is not going to eventuate out in public because of the pushback that's happening. But I was made to feel very unwelcome within that institute. So, but anyway, I did a PhD in education, sociology of education. I looked specifically at the use of technology in classrooms for senior year students, so students in 11 and 12. And then prior to that, though, all of my study was in the field of international relations, which I absolutely loved. Amazing teams. I love that whole field, which is where this podcast and my channel hopefully is heading back in the direction of that field, because that's I think where my true passion is. Education is linked. I realize that, and it's very important. And we need to. There's a lot of fights that need to be had in the education system, but it kind of, and we know this now, that everything is moving to these multinational, multilateral organizations, and I find that field very, very interesting. And that's my idea, is to head back in that direction, having finished the PhD. Yeah,
I'm halfway through reading a book called Brutal Minds, and it mainly focuses on American universities, but it really details how these separate classes are set up, and they encourage kids to join these classes, and it's always got some fluffy name associated with it. But what they basically do is they engage in a almost pseudo psychology, where they'll first get up there, the lecturer or the academic, and they'll give the students a little bit of piece of their own history, a little bit, and they'll be vulnerable towards the students. So they'll give them something that's very vulnerable. Then they'll get the white kids up there, and they'll get them to do the same thing. But when the white kids reveal something about them, they'll use that against them later and push it into the path of white privilege and all these. And that's how it's about breaking down their sense of belief, their belief systems, breaking that down, pushing them through a very traumatic and hard period of self-examination. And then once they've completely broken them, building them back up with all this work ideology and everything. Did you see anything of that when you were in the universities? Even was that going on 15 years ago?
I didn't see anything like that, but what I will say, and this is touching on what I was saying before about what happens in university eventually makes it into everyday life, what you've just described is actually happening in primary school classrooms in certainly in areas of America, and it's breaking down the children's idea that you have privilege just simply because of the color of your skin. And yeah, it's bad enough that it was happening at a university level, particularly in the way that you described. So the fact that they were, I would say, probably being a little bit dishonest with their vulnerability, but demonstrating to the students that you are safe, and I don't like that word, but sometimes it's useful. You're in a safe environment, and then deliberately trying to get that student to be honest and expose a vulnerable part of themselves. and then taking that vulnerability and that honesty and then turning it around as a weapon, that is very dangerous psychologically for anyone at all, let alone to kind of say, and remembering that these lecturers, professors, they don't know the individual background of that student. They could have a trauma background themselves. They could be from complete poverty. They could be from a sexual assault survivor. No, that's absolutely heinous. But what I definitely did see and experience at university was groupthink. And let me explain what I mean by that is this idea that universities are places where there is a freedom of expression, a freedom of ideas, critical thinking, where you go to a tube and you debate issues out. This is not the reality at all. What it is if you speak out of line, or you don't give the professor what they need or what they want to hear, or if you disagree with the class, and I can give a perfect example of that. In about 2009, I made the suggestion in a university tutorial that the clash of the civilizations is still occurring. And they spoke about it as if it was a dead and archaic idea. I was literally laughed out of that tutorial. And that's just mind-boggling. There was no engaging with me. There was no discussion. There was nothing. So universities, to their detriment, perhaps in the past were critical thinkers, and there was debate, but certainly in the last 20 years, it is about conforming to the group consensus, not stepping out of line, and focusing on funding, focusing on your career projection and everything else. But yeah, that's what really surprised me, was the level of groupthink that was involved.
Got a comment here from Graham that's just popped up. The false flag ideology begins at uni. The uni students eventually go out into the workforce and take these views with them. Let's not forget teachers begin at uni. I guess that's been the argument all along. And I've spoken to politicians as well, conservative politicians, and I've said, aren't you guys concerned about what's happening with the indoctrination that's, we just lost him.
He'll come back.
That was, don't know what happened there. Maybe he's, but we've got you back, Adam.
I'm back. Hey, I'm sorry. I'm using Wi-Fi from the house I'm staying at up in QLD today. So I'm not quite sure. It was all right the other day when I did a little Zoom, but we'll see how we go. Here he's back.
I have literally got no idea what happened then.
ASIO must have not liked what we were talking about.
Listening and watching. I don't know if you realize, but I just completely, my whole computer, everything just shut down. That has never happened before. I will say this, I had to download the Google Chrome, I think is what we're playing through. I have a Mac, and look, Mac just is Apple. One of these companies, right? They just do not like anyone else. So whether I've accidentally downloaded something, my apologies. Let's hope that doesn't happen again.
All good. It was only brief. It was only that's the dangers of live streaming. Back in the old days, we could cut that stuff out. But we've been pretty lucky so far.
I put it down to the what do you call it? The truth. What is it called? The something of truth. The ministry of truth.
Maybe we were speaking too much truth and someone's listening and they just
that's what happens. I'm sure we've all got some sort of tag on us to monitor us and what we're all doing. We've all been pretty out there and speaking our, like exactly like what you were talking about with the universities and groupthink and stuff like that. As soon as you have an individual thought, they just hit you on the hammer on the head with the hammer because they don't want you to do that.
Yeah. It's dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah. So what led you to podcasting? I mean, it's not a light decision to say, okay, I'm just going to start my own podcast. But how did you decide, okay, I'm going to give this a go?
Yeah, it's a good question because it's a really unusual choice for me because probably the last 20 years I've done everything I could to avoid being seen and being in public. I've very much hidden away. There's a large aspect of my personality that's very introverted, but I remember a lot of moments during COVID, but one distinct memory that really remains with me is that I was driving back late from work one night, and I'm sure you can appreciate this, Stephen. There's normally not many people around as it is, but it was about 10 p.m. You'd normally get at least cyclists, people walking, traffic, no one at all. 16 kilometers, this was during the first lockdown. I drive 16 kilometers to and from work, not a single car. The only thing I saw were 5 police cars, and one of them was like blocking a main road. Another car was just pulled over and they were doing some inspection of a parked vehicle, and it just freaked me out. At that moment, I just looked around and I thought, there is something wrong here. This is Australia, and there is something wrong here. And then what that led me to do, let me preface that with the fact that I used to be pro-vaccine. I used to be a New York Times subscriber, a Sydney Morning Herald subscriber, Guardian subscriber. So this was quite the leap for me to even notice that. But what I did do after that, and believe it or not, it made me sick to the stomach, is I started to do research. And at that point in time, doing your own research was like the worst thing in the world. And I came across Joe Rogan. This is probably going to make you laugh as well. The idea that I had of Joe Rogan was that he was a far-right extremist, because that is what I'd been told by the corporate media. And I found his podcast with Robert Malone. Wow. I went for a walk, and I normally go for a walk for 90 minutes. I'm very high energy and I need to constantly get my energy out. I listened to the whole thing. I went for a walk, the same walk again. I did a loop, and because I wanted to listen to it a second time. And then I listened to Joe Rogan's interview with Peter McCullough.
Yep.
And then I listened to those 2 podcasts the rest of that afternoon and evening, probably 3 or 4 times. And it was equal measures. All of a sudden, all of those doubts in my head, I felt like I was being understood. I felt like I wasn't crazy anymore. But also it was a little bit upsetting, because there's a lot of realization that, man, there's a lot of lies. I've been lied to. Everything I've been told is wrong. But then that set me down the path, down a very different rabbit hole from the rabbit hole that I was used to going down, like from an academic background, or even from my own usual background search on the news sites. I went down a very different one. And I'm really glad that I did. I found out a lot of stuff about the vaccines, about mRNA technology. And I, right from the very beginning as well, I knew they were actually admitting that the COVID virus was not as deadly or as bad as swine flu, bird flu, and MERS. I had swine flu and MERS, and I'm like, well, what's the big issue? What's going on here? But that initial thought when I was in the car that night was what triggered me off. And then all of that kind of sat with me. And then the final straw for me was when, because I didn't get the jabs, I don't know what happened. Well, I vaguely recall what happened in Sydney. I definitely know what happened in Victoria. But in Queensland, the decision was made that those people that had chosen to defy the government, the teachers would have their pay cut. Some people were laid off, or many people actually were laid off. But in the general population, those of us that survived all of that, we would be in a further lockdown for 3 months. I was absolutely furious that, because this is very clear that it was not based on science. It was not based on stopping the spread. It was not based on any of that. This was just being vindictive, because we didn't follow the government line. We're going to lock you out of public life for 3 months. And up here, like I'm sure in the rest of Australia, the people who got the jabs took that directive very seriously. So no cafes, no restaurants, no cinemas, no outdoor events. Everywhere you go, you were asked for your vaccination certificate. And I just couldn't believe that this was happening in a democratic society at all.
And look, sorry to cut in, Victor. Yeah, but it's important that you're recounting all this. And there might be people out there saying, oh, can they shut up about COVID? They're still talking about COVID. But so much happened to us, and you're listing them off. Bang, 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 bang. If you don't keep reminding people what happened, they forget. And there's things that I forget sometimes. Someone will bring up, there was choppers flying out in the western suburbs of Sydney. I'll forget about that sort of stuff. If you don't keep talking about it and reminding us what happened, you have to keep reminding people what happened so it doesn't happen again, and so we don't put up with it again. Because I think someone said once, if they had done just one of those things, that one of those restrictions on its own, people would have pushed back against it. Because they did them all together so quickly, they got away with it.
Yeah.
So we need to keep reminding people exactly what happened.
I don't think anybody should stop talking about it until there's the Royal Commission's done, and then the correct measures have been taken to either
some accountability,
punishments, jails, imprisonments, whatever, fines, whatever it is. Okay, we shouldn't let it go in our history. This history, it's not resolved yet. It's still an open book. I'm not sure that they still drive these vaccines. They're still pushing them. Okay, they're still in New South Wales. They're still, nursing and hospital jobs are still requiring, up-to-date vaccines. I mean, and I just want to comment as well, Victor. You had a massive crash course. So you had Dr. Robert Malone, and Dr. Peter McCullough. When we were skeptical from the start, we slowly worked our way into those two great minds and their thoughts and what they were saying. We would research and have a look and that. And you copped it on a Joe Rogan, which is like a 2-hour podcast anyway. So you would have copped Robert Malone and then Peter McCullough, who we've also had on our show. It's kind of like almost like if you were say on the left wing, all of a sudden they just slapped you across the right wing going, hold on a second. I've been lied to my whole life.
Adam, man, I was not left wing. I would say that I was far left.
Okay.
Far left. About as far left as you can go. Remember what I said? I remember Joe Rogan in my world. And remember, this is not just on the street. This is in academia. He was dangerous. He was an extremist. He was controversial, and he was extreme right wing. Imagine now, Joe Rogan being I cannot fathom him being described in that way at all. And as to your point, Stephen, everything that you just said was almost verbatim what Aaron Rodgers has said over the last week, and got into a lot of trouble again. I mean, he did accuse Jimmy Kimmel of being a pedophile. But I hate that guy. But anyway, Jimmy Kimmel, to be clear, not Aaron Rodgers. But no, he said exactly the same thing. The most important thing, like you said, Adam, is to hold people accountable. And there's a very good reason for that. And that is because not only are the people that were involved in that period being held up as heroes, but the ones that haven't stepped aside or retired have been promoted. So this is encouraging these ideas so that then the next time something happens, whatever that may be, I mean, their latest obsession seems to be disease X, which they couldn't stop talking about at the WEF recently, which is absolutely petrifying when you consider that no one was able to actually define what it was, but it's coming. I mean, that's insane. Or
that was a literal quote. The woman said, "We don't know what it is, but it's out there. It's definitely out there." I mean, how do you know it? How do you know it's out there?
They just haven't patented it yet. The paperwork hasn't gone through.
They haven't patented the vaccine yet.
Well, probably. It's just so ridiculous. You know what? It's so ridiculous that even your friends on the left wing, okay, just how they don't. It's like they have no self-worth or they don't care that the people are poisoning them. They don't care when you look up in the sky that there's lines, straight lines in the sky, and you're like, well, that's not nature. Why are they there? They don't care that that there's all these different things happening to them, and they don't care. They don't care that the plant-based products, those, soy burgers and things like that. Okay, is just as bad for them as is worse for them than actually eating, a steak that's naturally grown. So I don't understand their concept, and I've tried to understand the left ideology, but I just can't get it. I don't grasp it.
Oh, you absolutely, you can't understand it because it'll just drive you nuts. But more to the point, not only are these these burgers, these plant-based vegan burgers, miracle burgers, or whatever they want to call them, bad for our health, they're shocking for the environment, which is actually part of their justification for doing so. But I've got an even better example of that is there is a brand of shoes, a famous brand of vegan shoes. That I may mispronounce the brand name. It's a French brand. It's called Vidja or Vedja. And it is absolutely hilarious how much these people, the vegans, love these shoes. Now, they're made from rubber and oil.
Yep.
Now, they don't know that, but all they focus on is the fact that they're vegan. Now, question, where do you think the rubber comes from? Answer, the Amazon. They're knocking down the Amazon to build rubber plantations, and those rubber plantations are supplying that shoe company. And these people that are purchasing don't realize that the oil that's in there is the fossil fuel, and the rubber is coming from the Amazon rainforest.
Well,
so tell me, or we can wear leather shoes, which come from the carcass of the cow, in which we eat every part of that carcass, and we show respect to the animal that's passed by then using its skin for our protection, for shoes, for furniture, whatever. Now, tell me that is not more sustainable and more respectful than these ridiculously plastic rubber vegan shoes. It makes no sense. So it deliberately doesn't make sense.
We started this show off with the Reckless Renewables rally, where they're bulldozing forests and ripping up farmland to put up wind farms. These, I live in a teal electorate. They're singing the praises of these things.
No.
Yeah. Right.
Well, what about this?
Sorry, go, Adam.
Go.
Sorry, my internet must be really bad, guys. So I do apologize if I'm talking over the top of you more than normal. But I was going to say, all right. So when they do these, you need soy products and soybeans and all this kind of stuff to make the foods and all that kind of stuff. They have to literally strip the land, right? They poison the land with glyphosate, which is one Roundup or whatever. So that, so I watched a podcast. There was a podcast about it. That if you want to be animal protection, you've got to think about how many things die in order to make what you're consuming. Okay, and he worked it out that it's 1,000 things die to make a soy burger, whereas to make a beef burger, one thing dies, which is the cow.
Get this, Adam. I was part of this new show that's going to air on Sky News, The Jury. I was in the pilot episode, right? So I don't know if it's going to go to air, but you can see the trailer. I'm in the trailer on Sky News.
You are? All right.
Yeah. Woo! So they were having a debate on nuclear energy, and they had a Greens upper house member there, and she was arguing against nuclear energy, and she said, well, one of the reasons why we don't want nuclear energy, apart from the costs that it will end up being, we don't want any more mining, so we'll have to go with the renewables. As if solar farms and wind farms just magically grow out of the ground and don't require any mining at all. This is the argument that these people put forward. And Victor, I want to ask you this question, because you said you were far left, so I'm assuming that a lot of your friends were similar. Did you get a reaction from them when you started going, hang on a second, my mind's just done a 180. You guys need to see all this new information that I've found. Did they react as well as you did to this new information, or did they react badly?
No, I had to accept that life was going to be a little bit lonely for a while. And you mentioned, I think, right at the outset that I do research work with the university. I've lost work with that, and it's like I was saying to you earlier, Adam. It's that they can't deal with the truth. So when someone like me steps away, I'm kind of spoken about, I believe, in the field of, well, we've lost him. He's a conspiracy theorist now.
Yeah.
So they very strangely express empathy towards me, that I've been lost, which is a little bit ironic given the fact that I feel like I've been set free. And found. Initially, exactly. But initially it is, I'll be honest with people, it's really hard. It's a bit depressing. You realize that throughout your entire life, you've been given these narratives and these lies, which I certainly swallowed wholeheartedly for a very long time. And to answer the question from earlier, how I got into podcasting, when I realized that that had happened to me and I got over the sadness and the anger of that additional lockdown, I realized that basically I had two choices. I could either do what I think most people do, because I think most people come to the realization that a lot of it is lies and a lot of it is bullshit and a lot of it is about control. But they realize that by speaking out or stepping out of line, that they will suffer. So they go back in line and they submit. And because they do that, they play the game, they get the reward of the game, which is the materialistic reward. And the other option is to do what I did, and that is to speak out. And that is why I chose to do the podcast. I also chose to do the podcast because I realized that a lot of people in that first camp that I was speaking to, they had jobs, they had mortgages, they had families, children. This to me, this says that they don't really have the agency to speak out. Whereas I, one of the things about being alone, not having my own family, is that I don't have things to lose other than things to myself. And yes, I suffer financially because of my decision to do this, but I also have the time that they don't have, because some people don't just work one full-time job, they work two full-time jobs, because that's what happens when you're working on a minimum wage. You have to do what's necessary to bring the money in. So this was my decision, was to kind of sacrifice that in order to bring voice to not only what I was thinking, but what those people were thinking. And this is why I got a little bit upset with a recent guest that was kind of trying to defend doctors. And my pushback on that was that it's a bit different when you've got people that are truck drivers, or you've got people that are tradespeople that can't speak out, because if they lose their income, that's it, they're gone. Doctors not only have massive incomes, they have massive nest eggs normally. They will often have portfolios of property. They have the ability, and also it wouldn't have taken all the doctors to speak out in order to stop a lot of the atrocities that happened over the last 3 years. It would have only taken a few key people in positions of power to go, hang on, let's just hit pause here for a second and let's talk about this. That's what some people like Gigi Foster did at great personal cost to herself, but not a lot of the doctors did. So, sorry, that was to go back to the original question that you asked, was why I started the podcast. It was because of all the things that I saw going on around me, and also realizing that I had to get over my nervousness and my my shyness and my hesitation, because I had to do something. I had the ability to do something that many other people don't, and I felt the need to speak up. Yeah.
Well, I'm very much like you. I'm very shy. I'm a bit of a recluse, but I've just had to push myself into these situations, especially group situations. I'm horrible with group situations. I just want to retreat into a dark little corner, but I've had to push myself into this because you just, I know a lot of people say it's a spiritual calling. I'm not religious, but there definitely is a calling for people to stand up. And it's not as strong as it used to be during COVID, but under that COVID pressure, you just felt like you had to do something and you had to push back in a certain way. And I do understand what you're saying about the doctors, but I guess once you start making more and more money, it's never enough. You start thinking about the seaside house that you're about to buy. And you brought up Aaron Rodgers. Well, look what happened on the Pat McAfee show. Pat McAfee, he struts around with his wife beater on. He goes, no one's going to tell me what to do. Well, when ESPN are paying you $85 million and your mate sitting next to you spouting off conspiracy theories, well, you're going to kick your mate off the show, aren't you? Because you're not going to give up $85 million. I'm not saying doctors get paid that much, but it's I guess it's a tough decision. But that's to say that the doctors were even aware that something bad was going on, because a lot of the times they just read the medical literature. They're not really investigating things on their own. They're just going along with, I read it in, this journal or whatever it is. It's the consensus among doctors, and they just go along with it. I remember I went to go we're thinking about getting my daughter vaccinated, just the normal childhood vaccinations. So I asked for the printout of all the ingredients in the vaccination, and one of them had formaldehyde in it.
Yeah.
And I said to the doctor, I said, "Is this just is this just a small dose of formaldehyde? Is this just to get the immune system to react to it?" And she grabbed the paper off me and she's looking at it. You could tell she had no idea. No idea.
Because they don't research. They do what they're told. Don't forget, they've been indoctrinated for 7 years through the medical system. Their peers who are training them have been indoctrinated through the medical system, right? So they go, well, we've got ATAGI. ATAGI say it's okay, so then therefore you go and do it. That's like you would have people that you have, like, okay, so where you research and you have trusted sources that you wouldn't really maybe do too much background on, okay? So a trusted source that you said that you have would say, hey, this, and this, okay? And then you would go, oh, okay, yeah, no worries, you're pretty good normally, this, and this. That's what the doctors have done as well. They don't do any research. And Dr. Peter McCullough said the same thing. They're injecting themselves with this crap and not doing any research on what it does.
Adam, you're 100% right. And let me share something with you. As being an academic researcher, I would say maybe 90 to 95% of professors and academics read the abstract at the top of the paper, and that is all they read. They love anything that summarizes and condenses large amounts of research into like a single paper. So they will often read summaries of papers that have been put together from, say, a researcher has looked at a certain field, whether it's vaccines in Australia or whatever. That researcher goes and looks at 300 studies, and then they produce a summary, and then that summary has an abstract, and that abstract is all people read.
Politicians do the same thing.
There's a giant field that is reduced down to a summary sheet, or in this case, if it's an article, it'll be between 5,000 and 7,000 words. And then that summary sheet is then reduced down to an abstract, which is one paragraph. That's what most people read.
Yeah, well,
and
Michael
that's what reporters read, and that's what they report on.
Michael O'Neill spoke of this a couple of weeks ago, where a senior politician was speaking to him. He said, Michael, Big Pharma, their representatives are coming in. Oftentimes they're young women dressed very, very nicely. They've got a brochure with a few short points in there. It's nice and glossy. It's presented very well. And, we don't even read the thing, but it's very impressive, the presentation. Then someone on the other side comes in, they're disheveled. They're not wearing a tie or anything like that. They're presenting them with pages and pages and pages of all this information. Like, we're not going to read this. Like, it's just, and that's what happens. We get, like, Adam and I get sent, I'm sure you, we get sent videos and articles and all these big research, proposals. We don't have time to read all this stuff and watch all these videos. I mean, as good natured as these people are by sending it to us, there's no way we can consume that much information in the time that we have.
And don't forget as well, and don't forget too, we're not specialists in those particular fields too. So what happens is, right, and this is portrayed really well, and I talk to people all the time, and I've said it before, watch the TV series Dope Sick. Michael Keaton's in it. It's a great production. Okay, it might be on a platform you don't like, okay, but it's exactly what you were describing, and it's exactly what we've described in the past, okay? They come in their short skirts with a nice little brochure. They come with teddy bears for the kids, and they go, here you go, and have 1,000 blister packs of this particular product, or have it 1,000 milligrams for free of this stuff. And what happens is they then administer it to your patients, okay? And they get them hooked in that way. Don't forget too, right? There's a lot of financial incentives that are given by these big pharmaceutical companies to doctors and stuff like that.
In Australia, they can't outrightly bribe doctors, but they work around it very well. I have let me just say, I have an acquaintance that works for Big Pharma. So what's not allowed is direct payments, direct gifts, any gifts of any kind. But keep in mind that there are multiple celebrations throughout the year where it is socially acceptable, to give people gifts, particularly if they're clients. So think about Easter. People give gifts at Easter, right? Yes. So you send an Easter basket. And Big Pharma sends these insane Easter baskets to their doctors. And you wouldn't believe some of the stuff that's in there, like watches. It's insane. And they do
gold
the same
bullion.
thing at Christmas. Exactly. Well, I don't know.
Like, here's 100 grand.
Probably.
You know, they don't care.
The
It's
other
a
thing
gift.
they do is they will go to Hawaii, and they will like Big Pharma, that is, they'll go to Hawaii and they will like book out an entire 6-star resort, and then they invite doctors to come to their conference. It's not a conference. It's a golfing holiday with their buddies. And they might get up and talk for maybe 5-10 minutes, but the talk is, of course, a sales pitch for their new product. And because doctors, like you said, Stephen, they don't have a lot of time. Also, Adam, I think you said to cover everything is just impossible. So if they're getting that, and they're getting it from a beautiful woman, and it's like a single page of paper, and they got a holiday to Hawaii, it's at the front of mind, of course, they're going to give that blister pack sample to the 100%. Patient that comes in. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, we're laughing about all this stuff, but it is actually very serious, because this is the reason why we went through periods like COVID and other things that have gone on throughout time. So I mean, it's funny because it's so outrageous, but it works. It's working for them.
You wouldn't think that we're in such a country like as ours, or America or Western world, right? And have to be looking over your shoulder. Not to mention, you're looking over your shoulder now, not at some mug walking down the street that you worry is going to take your wallet. You're worried about the government taking you for everything you have. It's a different kind of world now. It's not. I'm not worried about Joe Blow down the street. I'm worried about big government and big pharma, killing me, like literally.
Yeah, well, they make money from sickness. That's the perverse business model that they have. You and I being well does not make them money. They need us to be sick and unhappy as well. But further, it is a bit of a laugh when we talk about the hidden bribes and things. But it gets even worse than that, because the people that are supposed to regulate big pharma, whether that's the FDA in America or the TGA here, they're all completely compromised and completely captured by big pharma as well. And that's where it's no longer a laughing matter. Because if you were able to get to people at the distribution level, like the doctors, and get them, and you and I know that happens, most members of the general public would be like, yeah, he or she, or they're just probably suggesting that because maybe they get a kickback or something. But most people in Australia would say to you that the TGA is not compromised, and that they will trust anything that's been given the tick. And that was proven in COVID to be fundamentally wrong. When you got 50% of the people who were on the COVID advisory committee, so that basically was it was a dozen people that decided whether or not the vaccines were going to be brought here and given the tick of approval. 50% of them declared a conflict of interest.
Well, we had
the problem is we can't find out as a general public, and multiple journalists have tried to find out what those conflicts of interest were, and they don't have to declare anything.
Well, we had Dr. Philip Altman on a while back now, but he spent his life advising the TGA and working with big pharmaceutical companies, and he'll tell you straight out, when COVID happened and they started introducing these vaccines, it was clear to him that something was wrong. They weren't following the same practices that they would have in the past, and he said this is completely abnormal. So that's why he started to speak out. But how many people are listening to Dr. Altman? He's out. Independent media will have him on, but I did see him on Alan Jones once, but that's about it. He's not on the major mainstream media outlets or anything like that. So they do that. They try, before they discredit you, they just silence you, and they don't put any attention on you at all. So maybe that will segue into my next question for you, Victor, because you've talked about how you got into the podcasting, but what challenges did you face when you started podcasting?
Just one more point on what we were talking about before. The director and deputy director of the vaccine program at the FDA in America, when the boosters came out, they pushed back and said that they shouldn't be released, particularly for children. They then both quit, and they've both got gag orders. So it's just mind-boggling what has happened and what has gone down. So anyway, Sorry, what was your question again? It was something about the future.
Firstly, if you're a regulator, you shouldn't have a gag order be put on you in the first place. I mean, that's just counterproductive.
Yeah, that's
Well, I mean, that's kind of the definition of their job, right? Is to look into a product. If it's not safe, is to then push back to the company and say, this is not safe.
Yeah, you shouldn't be hiding anything. There shouldn't be anything to hide. Everything should be out in the open.
Yeah, but that's biting the hand that feeds you, and you're not allowed to do that. Haven't you learned?
Well, there's also that open door policy, that revolving door that just seems to happen between, and people talk about this a lot in terms of America, but it happens here as well. You know, when you've got the politicians that are like seamlessly and very quickly moving from politics straight into the business sector and then straight into big pharma, straight into big tech. And I say that because we've got an ex-premier here, Anna Bligh, who was very popular, and she stepped down, or she stepped down from premiership, and then she went straight into the business world, and is now, I think, in charge of the Business Council of Australia.
Yeah, well, Scott Morrison will do the same thing. Apparently, he has a job in America somewhere.
Look,
they all do it.
Yeah, exactly.
In New South Wales, they love going to work for Transurban here after they build all these big motorways and things like that. But
New South Wales politicians have got it down to an art. I have to say, the corruption in Sydney is kind of mind-boggling.
It's where the money is, mate. It's where the money
definitely. Is. I heard something about the runway that was happening, the airport out near Penrith.
Second airport, Bingelly.
Yeah. Is it true that a government minister purchased the land because he knew that particular? Yeah, right. It's extraordinary.
Wasn't it Bob Carr and Morris Yemmer?
No. It was someone else, but I think they what was it again? Was it 5 million or so that they bought the land for and sold it for 50 or 500 million or something like that?
It was insanity. Yeah.
After they bought it before they announced the airport and sold it after they announced the airport, which should be illegal. But as Adam and I,
he just got lucky.
Hey, there's so many things in politics that work like that they're above board, but they've just found their way of just pushing. It's almost like money laundering or something like that. We won't go into it, but there's a lot that you do see when you get involved in these political parties. I mean, it does happen, but I guess
the inside track there.
Yes, we've got some stories that we can't tell all of them.
Yeah. But hey, if you're ever going to buy a big block of land, just let me know and I'll put in.
Yeah,
well, we unfortunately don't have that sort of information.
We don't get that information. But I tell you what, they do buy land though. Councillors, pollies, from council level right through.
Well, Jesse Ventura used to talk about it, and this was in America, but his father used to say to him, do you know how you can tell that politicians are corrupt? They spend more money trying to get the job than the job pays when you're in there. So you can tell, they spend billions of dollars, like even presidential campaigns to become president, and then they get paid only a fraction of that. So they're making money. I think that I heard the other day that the top 10 or so, the biggest performers on the American Stock Exchange were Democrat politicians. I think Nancy Pelosi was in there, and they were saying, Nancy slipped down the list a little bit. Like, they shouldn't be in the stock market.
I saw that report. She slipped down the list by only having a 68% return in 1 year.
Yeah.
She beat the market. It was, not even by a little bit. It was phenomenal. I saw that report. That was just open corruption. It's insane. But in saying that, people are getting around it because there's people you can follow on Twitter who somehow know the trades that they're making. And if you subscribe to their channel, they literally say, Nancy Pelosi has just made this trade. And it's hard to know whether her gains are coming from the fact that she's doing insider trading. But I'm like, is she getting an extra bit of cream and an extra boost because everyone's following her trades now and everyone's doing that? And so she's like, it's a good thing to it being made public so that, Joe Blow around the corner can make a little bit of money from her corruption as well. But the whole system is broken. But there's an argument to be made that until the system is fixed, maybe we can make a little bit of money from it as well. But yeah, that insider trading is out of control in America.
So now that you're in the independent media space, what is your view of it? Because my view is that it's up to us to all work together and we can piggyback on each other. It's not a competition. It's not us versus the other people. Like we've had Graham Hood and John Larder on. We've had other people on too. I can't think at the moment.
Yeah,
but
we had the other podcaster. I can't remember his name offhand right now, and I haven't got my book.
Good. Look how good we are. It will come to me.
No, I haven't got my book on me. I haven't got my. I have to swap books, and I can't go through.
But it's not a competition, and it really it's up to us to really work together and promote each other. But what's your overall view of independent media here in Australia? Obviously, we can look to America, and you can look at Tim Pool and Joe Rogan and Patrick Bet-David, and they work together as well. They piggyback off each other, and that's the model for me. To see the success over there. It hasn't quite translated here in Australia, but where do you see it going in the years going forward?
I think that there's two things. There's the Australian market and the podcasting and the market here, and then there's the global market. To be honest, I think globally, podcasting is getting to saturation point. I think that everyone is doing podcasting now, and it's almost getting like diluted a little bit. Australia, I think Australia, there's still room for growth. As I said at the outset, with so many Australians just being completely unaware of platforms like Rumble, there's still room for growth there. I think the growth is going to have to come from people who do things a little bit differently. So people who can focus on a niche market and really speak to that market. Because I feel like the podcasting model or the content creation model that's being followed a lot of the time is exactly like the old corporate model, and that is like the doom scroll, make it entertaining, make it controversial, get the clicks. I don't know if that's going to work moving forward. My hope, in particular, because of the way that I present, is that I hope that there's still a space for like rational, objective, calm analysis. The other, because that's what I want to present, and the other thing that I see happening, that I think will happen, is increasing consolidation of the global tech and news industries. We've kind of seen this kick off a little bit in 2019 with the Trusted News Initiative. So that was where for the first time, you had old school corporate media linking with big tech, linking with new media, and creating, in particular, YouTube, as I know about, and creating this network that is all about censorship and all about stopping dissenting voices, people that aren't on point, aren't on narrative, and people that are getting too popular. And the thing that both yourself and me are going to suffer from, particularly if you're still on YouTube, is part of that Trusted News Initiative was to throttle new content creators, particularly new content creators that are not on message. And what that means is YouTube changed their algorithm that if you were, say you guys were to come on and you were to get on McCullough or Malone or whoever, and your figures, particularly if you're streaming live, start to go like mad, start to go through the roof, YouTube's algorithm will cut in, just like what happened to me before. I'm not saying that was it, by the way, but that's what they'll do. They'll cut in, they'll kill it, because they only allow, I don't know their exact wording, but it is established, well-known voices who we trust to be able to go viral. That's why the idea that anyone can still go viral is not true, because all of that is now very much controlled. So it's going to be, so I guess from our point of view, I think it's going to be hard for us to crack through, but there's certainly, I believe there's still a market for what we do, definitely in Australia. I try to focus on the Australian audience because I think globally people are saturated, and it's really hard to crack into someone's content kind of habits or content routines. People really get their people, and they want to stick with that person, and they want that person every single day to update. and upload. And even though I'm a lot smaller, I've experienced this over the Christmas period, because I don't know what it was like for you guys, but I decided, because I was so hectic and busy November, December, I was exhausted. I needed 2 weeks off. I didn't upload content for about 15 days. So in December, the last week that I uploaded, my videos were averaging, like the top videos were averaging maybe 500 views like per week, per video. So it was really taking off, was going quite well. Took 15 days off, I've come back, and I'm now averaging like 50 to 100. So it only is taking 2.5 weeks for people to drop me out of their viewing routine. So that's another challenge that we're going to have moving forward. But I do think the biggest challenge that we're going to face is this consolidation of the big media companies with big tech, with the traditional and corporate media, and that is designed to just crush us before we can even really find an audience or a voice.
And it was Chris from Chris Coveries was the name that I was thinking of. So that's the other, and he's helped us a lot behind the scenes. But to your point, Victor, you're saying that that's the challenge that we're going to face. Above all of that is the misinformation, disinformation legislation that they're proposing. I mean, that could shut us down completely, potentially. And you know, I've seen the debates on Twitter. They say, oh, you know, if you're not spreading misinformation and disinformation, you've got nothing to worry about. Well, who decides what is misinformation and what is disinformation? We just lived through COVID, and we just talked before about having to remind people of what we went through during that period. Do we have to remind people again? They were pushing masks. They were pushing the safe and effective line. They were pushing so many different, official information agendas, narratives, all sorts of different things that are slowly getting debunked. But if this misinformation and disinformation legislation comes in, well, what recourse will we have to push back against narratives in the future?
None, because that's what happened. And the scariest one is malinformation, because malinformation is by definition, their own definition, by the way, not mine, theirs, information that goes against government agenda, government initiative, government program. So if you're questioning the government and you're not doing it in a off the cuff sort of like comedy way, but if you're saying, look, this health advice is wrong, that will get you banned. So that malinformation is the scariest one. But to your point, I think you're talking about the legislation in Australia.
Yes.
Yeah, right. Even
there is similar legislation in other countries as well,
and the WHO, specifically in regards to things like climate change and the pandemic treaty. And the reason that I focus on the WHO is because they're the ones that got me banned from YouTube. And because when I spoke about the class action suit that Dr. Melissa McCann was bringing forward into the High Court in Australia, I was very careful with my wording, but the whatever I did triggered the algorithm at YouTube. I immediately had the video removed. I had a strike. I appealed all of it, of course. And I said to them, look, what I was reading has been accepted by the courts in Australia and has also been reported on, at that time, it was only Channel 9, but Channel 9 as well. And their reply was to say that we do not go by the law or the legal system in Australia. We abide by the WHO's rules and guidelines. So, and because of that strike, they then throttled my account, because prior to that, I had someone that we both know, Professor Gigi Foster, on, and her stuff had gone quite well for me. So in my first few weeks, I'd gotten thousands of views and was doing quite well. So those two things meant that for the next 2 weeks on YouTube, if you actually typed in my name or the name of the channel, I wouldn't even show up. I had people that would log in front of me and watch the videos and like videos, and my counters just did not change. So it's, yes, we need to push back against the legislation that's happening in Australia, but we also need to consider what's happening what's going on above that, particularly when you've got these tech platforms that all of us are so linked into, that are making decisions about technically my channel here in Australia is a small business. So in a very, I know, convoluted way, but nevertheless a very true way, the WHO killed my small business through YouTube. And it didn't really matter what was happening in Australia or in the courts in Australia. I had no recourse to appeal that in Australia at all. I could go to a politician, I could go to the courts, nothing. I could do nothing because, you know, the WHO said that what I said when I said that, I'm not sure if I can say it. When I suggested that, maybe, how can I say this so you guys don't get in trouble? If vaccines were to cause something bad to happen, that's final, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. I'm sure we've said. I mean, as I might have said, we had one of our videos deleted off YouTube, and it was due
but it's not
to
good when that happens, you know. So let's just say you get what I'm saying. But that by saying that, even though in Australia they've accepted that fact, and they actually now have accepted that I think 11 people have had that happen in Australia from the different vaccines. The WHO still to this day does not accept that anyone on the globe has. So because I made that one suggestion, dead. So yeah.
And we I mean, same thing happened to us. We'd build up an audience on YouTube, and once they deleted our video, I'm like, no, that's it. We're going to head to Rumble now. So we had to rebuild the audience again. And now we're back on YouTube because we do the live stream and people can, it's easier for people to comment and stuff like that. But
yeah, people are much more confident with YouTube as a platform. They feel secure. There's a lot of lies out there about platforms like Rumble as being, you know, like the breeding ground of like fundamentalism in whatever form. That's where all the right-wingers are. That's where the pro-gun people are. That's where all the conspiracy people are. And they seem to have very successfully linked that to the idea that if people click on a link, they could potentially get a virus or they could get hacked. It's very, and they do that because France obviously banned Rumble because Rumble refused to ban RT News, which is a ridiculous decision. But they wanted to ban Rumble anyway because the EU hates Rumble. But now Brazil has as well. So this reinforces this idea about it being a dangerous platform. So I understand YouTube is important because it is still perceived by the large percentage of people as being safe. I just get frustrated because people don't see what's going on behind the scenes. And their free platform, which was good when it started, has been completely taken over and completely compromised. And I think that some people are slowly realizing it, but it's going to take a while. But I understand the need for YouTube for sure.
I just love the language though, you know, safe space, unsafe space, violence. These words have been convoluted completely and changed. So, you know, I remember when Elon Musk took over Twitter, turned it into X, right? And it became a fair, I know that there's still problems with it and whatnot, but it became a lot more freer and a lot more open and a lot more less restrictive, right? So then freedom people or people like us tend to move over to those platforms because we know we're not going to get our ass kicked or banned for saying something that might be a little bit, you know, off narrative, right? But then I remember speaking to family members and that, you know, oh, I don't like Twitter anymore because it's an unsafe space. You know, I don't like Twitter anymore because I don't want to be subjected to violence. Well, violence to me is physical. I don't understand if somebody swears at you online or says something that you don't like online. I don't understand how that can be violence. It can be not nice, but it's not violence. And then how is it not safe because you just turn the computer off and go do something else? Like, I don't understand that.
I think that this idea of words being violence is obviously being manipulated for political purposes, but it also shows a level of, in some regards, we should be great. We should be happy that we live in a society where people think that words are violence now. But I think if you're like me and you've experienced real violence, the idea, particularly extreme violence, the idea that words are in the same league as that sort of violence is offensive, actually. I find it really triggering. Sorry, but when people say that words are violence, really words, I mean, when I was a kid, it was sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. And that's an important philosophy because you can't run away and you can't ban and you can't cancel and you can't protect your kids from everyone in their life who might disagree with them. And disagreement is important, because if you ever move to a place where a lot of these people are, where you believe that you are 100% correct, this is actually a very dangerous place. And that's where dangerous ideologies start to grow. And that's where things like fascism start to grow and authoritarian starts to creep in. The only way I grow as an individual is to constantly challenge myself. Coming on this and doing this live stream today has been a big challenge for me. But you need to challenge yourself constantly, and you need to open yourself up to other ideas. And it's amazing what can happen when you do.
Well, you're a perfect example of that, Victor. It's like you were, as you said, extreme left. You happened to stumble on a couple of podcasts, and that's a crash course. That's a full-on crash course, right? And then it's not even an easy crash course. That's the hard one. So your whole life, your whole mentality was revolutionized in literally 3 hours. And then, you know, you would have to do your research to figure out more and more apart from that to really fully convert over. But that's what happens. You got challenged, you allowed yourself to get challenged, and then you grew as a person, you know, and that's what challenge. That's why we all put ourselves into different challenges to do that, you know, whether it be climb a wall, run a marathon, whatever it is.
Is when I was on the far left, well, where I don't want to say far left, the way I was.
But I know we know what you mean.
The way I was before I woke up, I was actually in a delusion. I was in a delusion that I was right, and I was also in a delusion that I was happy, and also on the right path. And part of the problem, or part of the issue, I think we have with people waking up from that delirium, which is what I was under, is that it's a very difficult and a very hard thing to do, because you have to face up to a lot of truths. And sometimes it's easier to just, rather than face up to truth, to just switch back on to whoever you watch on YouTube, or put on reality television, or scroll your phone. That's a much easier place to be. Yeah. I kind of lost my chain of thought there. I thought it was good.
But I get exactly what you're saying, because I challenge myself as well. So I do realize that if we're more on the conservative side of politics, everything that's on your feed, everything that you read, everything, you're always on that side of things, and you never get a perspective of the other side to bring you back to center a little bit. So what happens is you have to make sure that you do try to understand it, especially when I was a candidate, and then you're talking and debating people, you need to understand their perspective as well, because otherwise,
I feel for you guys, because people, when they're in Australia, I think they're just a bit nasty to smaller parties, and they're nasty, and you guys know exactly why they're nasty to people from smaller parties, because it's about maintaining the power of the big two, which really is just the big party, and ultimately is just a bunch of bureaucrats that are under the thumb of the US anyway, so does it really matter? But small groups can make a big difference, particularly in smaller populations like Australia, and that's why. And they never really let you guys speak. I mean, look at what they did to someone like Craig Kelly, because they disagreed with him on one issue. That was just insane what they did to that man. And when I say they, I mean the Liberal Party, but also the media, to just completely wipe an individual because they disagreed on one thing is mad. But, you know, and I always laugh about like this Q&A and programs like that, where they say that they get a balance because they get a member from Labor and a member from Liberal, but Liberal and then the Greens as well, but they don't get true independent voices on there. And I think sometimes that the idea about like the progressives and the conservatives and that, like us not being able to speak, I think that's kind of that's moving on. I see myself as subscribing to the common sense. Like we are speaking in my mind, we all have something in common, and that is that we speak common sense, and we see what's going on and we call it out, and we aren't taking the Kool-Aid that they do. And I don't think it matters if you're on the left or the right. One of the biggest things that I felt before I did wake up was just a profound sense of loneliness and not being understood. And it was one of the best things that I've had happen over the last year with the podcast was being exposed to people from different political perspectives, and that's what I think it boils down to, is we need to stop like thinking we know what the other person's going to say or what their politics are or what, and just start to listen to each other again. And because they're closing us out, and they're closing out small political parties for a reason. They don't want voices of dissent.
Yep.
Whether it's a small political party or podcasters or anyone in the media. And if you get too big, like Russell Brand did, then they just do a hack job on you. And
and they'll hack their own. That's the thing too, because I mean, he's traditionally leftist in that.
All it takes is one thing.
Yeah.
You know, and that's why they all live in fear. That's why they're all so careful, is because they intrinsically know that all I have to do is just say one thing out of line and I'm gone.
Well, I think that's probably it's probably what you were saying there about listening to people and being more open with your views. I think that's probably a good way to finish up tonight. But I'm going to hit you with a final question. It's a final segment on the ex-candidates, and I don't know how political you are, but it's called Build Your Own Fantasy Government. Now, Victor, you're in charge of the next Parliament of Australia, and you can choose 5 or 6 current politicians, former politicians. It could be experts in a certain field, could be your next door neighbor, could be living or dead. Anyone you can possibly think of, but 5 or 6 people to head up the next government of Australia. Victor, who do you choose?
Okay, so I have a bit of a confession. I'm obsessed with American politics.
Okay.
Me too. I'm a bit embarrassed to admit, but is it Robert Miles is the Deputy Prime Minister? Because I was thinking before we came on air, I don't even know who the Deputy Prime Minister is. Is it Richard Miles?
Richard Miles.
So I would have to say, to answer your question, I don't think anyone, certainly from the Teal Party, no one from the Greens. I don't think anyone from, not really anyone from Liberal Labor. How about you two?
Yeah,
I pick you two, and then you can pick another 4. How about that?
Yeah, well, I mean,
there was a guy I spoke to, and you mentioned his name earlier. He lives in northern New South Wales. I had him on my podcast very long time ago. He ran for a seat in northern New South Wales. Kevin
Lockery.
Yes, I believe
Kevin
so.
Lockery, yeah.
Yeah. Now, look, I didn't agree with everything that Kevin said, but the one thing that I got from him that was very genuine was he was authentic, he was honest, and he was very passionate, and he loved Australia, and I picked that up from you guys as well. And I think that, and I'm not just being patriotic because we just had the Australia Day, but I think that that's important because sometimes it feels like the politicians not only hate us, but they almost have an embarrassment about being Australian. And I know that sounds a bit mad, but I think that that's part of the deliberate thing. This goes back to the immigration. It goes back to a lot of these issues, is they have a disrespect and disregard for the citizens of this country, the history of this country. But they also, they have an embarrassment that they have of this country. So the fact that Kevin was, that was something that really came through very strongly. And when you looked at his competitors, I didn't hear that. I didn't see that. And he was also very positive about the future. He was able to speak about the future in a hopeful way. And that's actually also, as strange as that sounds, our leaders are supposed to instill hope for a better future, but they actually have not done that for a very long time. And I feel for the younger people, like I think both you guys have kids. What a really fraught time to be raising kids where they're teaching these kids that they are going to burn in like 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
That it's all over. Like, why bother? I mean, it's no wonder so many of them are on antidepressants and are in therapy. It's incredibly sad. So I think you two and Kevin. And
awesome. I'll take that. Thank you.
Trust you guys to pick another 3.
I tell you what, that would be one hell of a government. We're gonna drag you along with us, Victor.
You come with us. Like you just come on, just be part of. You can be part of the media and publicity.
Yeah.
Because mate, it would be different. It would be. I think, but if Stephen and I were in charge, it would be old school Australia. My first policy would be to go back when Australia functioned properly, and and put it back to there, and then rebuild from there.
Like
because you've already got the
computer. When you got a virus in the computer and you go back to last known safe.
Let's go back to let's go back to education when we were actually performing well. Let's go back when our fuel prices were low, when energy prices were low, when Australia was producing. We'll just go back, and then we'll try a different way to what we did previously. So I think that's what we really need to do. We need to learn from our mistakes, and we need to go back to where we were functional. And then what happens is, and then move forward in a new direction and not make the same mistakes we did. And that's, I think, the biggest thing with Australian politics and Australian politicians is that we don't learn from other people's mistakes or our own mistakes. We just have to fall in out. We have to make our own folly and then dig ourselves out of it. And that's what's happening with the reckless renewables. And that's what's happening with the politics at the moment. That's what we haven't learned from socialism. So we're voting in socialists. And it's just like, it's just never going to work. It's all just going to crumble, I think, in the end. And we need to get back to a safe loaded zone, a safe saved area, and then go again.
Well said.
Well,
thank you.
Victor, thanks for coming on tonight. I mean, I'm really impressed by your energy and your positivity and your knowledge as well. You're extremely intelligent, and you're able to articulate arguments in a certain way that's very clear and precise. And I've really enjoyed that about you tonight. So let everyone know how they can follow you, and maybe do you have any big plans coming up, or are you just going to keep doing what you've been doing, or are you going to push the podcast in a different direction or expand? What do you have anything in the pipeline, or just more interviews?
No, I think because it's only about 10 months old now, so I'm just going to stick. I try little changes here and there, but nothing too major. So I'm going to stick to what I'm doing. I'm easy to find. I try to keep it easy. So there's only 2 places really. I think you've got my Twitter handle here.
Yep.
And then that's my Rumble page there. Please excuse my video tiles. I've learned how to do everything pretty well except for video tiles. And sometimes the process, I'm sure you guys know, it takes a lot longer than anyone could ever appreciate to put a video together. So sometimes when you get to the tile, you're just like, oh, fuck it, I'm just going to that'll do. And but hopefully the content's there. Oh yeah, that's my Twitter page. Yeah. I'm surprised. I don't use Twitter a lot, but yeah.
Awesome. Well, everyone, I encourage you to follow Victor, and hopefully we can have you back on in the future and debate.
This was really enjoyable. Thank you very much.
And the time has flown by, so we could have delved more into your background, but I think where the conversation went was very enjoyable and insightful as well. So thank you very much for coming on.
No, thank you for the invitation. I really appreciate it.
Yep, no worries. And thank you everyone for watching. Thank you, Adam. If you enjoyed this, we say it every week. Please share it out. Even if you have to inbox it to people in Messenger or email, or share it on your social media, or just word of mouth. Let people know that we're here and we're doing this every week. I'm also doing the Commanding the Narrative podcast on midweek, usually Thursdays. Check that one out as well. I just did one with Lee Evans in the UK. That was really interesting. A lot of overlap between Australia and the UK. So check that one out. We're going to be here every week. So please share it. Spread the word and let everyone know about us. But that's it for this week. We'll see you next time. Thank you very much.
See you later.